Hey, what's up, Cheddar? How we doing? I'm gonna put myself down here in the corner because today we are talking about um, something straight out of science fiction, an infectious cancer. You're telling me that cancer can be caused by a virus? That's wild. So we're going to be talking about the human papillomavirus, or HPV. And you can see some of these little virons here, these little viral particles chilling, hanging out, holding hands. And HPV is it's a DNA virus. So it's got its DNA wrapped around little histones, just like we do. That's how we organize our DNA too. It's pretty cool. We share some common characteristics with HPV. How interesting. And it has a little shell built out of proteins called capsid proteins. Okay, so it's pretty nice little virus, DNA based, pretty cool. Why should we care about this? Well, about 50,000 people every year have cancers associated with this virus. That's wild. You're telling me that a cancer can essentially infect other people. I mean, it's the virus, but it's like we have an infectious cancer. It's one of the wildest things in biology, if you think about it, right? That's not how cancers are normally thought to happen, but here we go. Biology is always more interesting than we think. And about half of those 50,000 are female and about half of those 50,000 are male, okay? And since this is a cancer caused by a virus, that means we can protect ourselves against it with a vaccine. That's wild. That's good news. Okay, so we first introduced this HPV vaccine in 2006, and this is showing you the decrease in cervical cancers since 2008. Okay, so we've had an 80% reduction. Okay, so we can protect ourselves from cancer via a vaccine. It's wild. It's so cool. So, how does this actually work? What is this virus doing? Well, it is putting its hands on the wheel of the cell cycle. So it grabs the wheel of the cell cycle. So these are the little cartoony hands of HPV grabbing on to the cell cycle. Okay, so this is how cells divide, and HPV basically takes control of that. Okay, just like it's driving a car. Okay, and we'll come back to that. So HPV controls our cell cycle, and then when it actually gets into this crazy mode, like it's going out for a joyride, that's when we get cancer. Okay, and we're going to learn how all that works here in a minute. So we're going to focus today on cervical cancer caused by HPV. So we need to learn a little bit about the female reproductive system. So here we've got the uterus and we've got some ovaries, the fallopian tubes or oviducts, and then down here we got the vagina. And that small opening in this tissue around it is called the cervix. Okay, and the cervix has this special little zone here where these cells in here, out here, this is the ectocervix, and these cells are like little flat pancakes, and there's many layers of them. It's called stratified squamous, and these protect, right? It's just like our skin. They protect us, okay? Right? We're going to have all kinds of goodies in here in the vagina, and we need a lot of protection. These cells up here in the endocervix, these cells here are column-shaped. They form these columns. Okay, and that's because they're little glandular-like cells. They're secreting this mucus. Okay, to make a little plug right here. All right. This little zone in here is called the transformation zone. And that's because the cells can transform either into these squamous cells or these columnar-like glandular cells. Okay, or column-shaped glandular cells. And the transformational zone can make either one of them. Okay, so these cells are more stem-like and like they can become different identities. So some of these cells are squamous, like over here, and then some are columnar in this transformation zone. Okay, and HPV really likes to cause cancer in this zone, probably because these cells are more stem-like, and that has something to do with HPV's ability to kind of get out of control here in this zone specifically. Okay, so HPV likes to cause cancers here in the transformation zone. HPV likes to cause cancers here. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about the normal cervical epithelium. So in the transformation zone, we got these stem-like cells. They're called basal cells down at the bottom of the tissue. And what they're doing is dividing. Then as those cells that divide move up, they start to differentiate into keratinocytes. They fill with keratin. Okay, it's a cytoskeleton protein and it hardens them. It's the same stuff that our hair is made out of. Okay, and this protects the tissue, the underlying tissue, right? It protects us because we got many layers of these hard keratin-filled cells. They're basically full of hair. And then the cells eventually slough off up here, and as they die, they slough off. And this is like a little coat of armor for us. Okay, so that's the normal cervical epithelium. Now, what's happening with HPV? So HPV comes in and it infects these cells down at the bottom, the stem-like cells, these basal cells. And the nucleus, the DNA from the HPV gets into the nucleus, but it doesn't get put into the chromosomes yet. It doesn't get put into our genome. It's not incorporated into us yet. The DNA is just in the nucleus. And what this DNA is doing, as this cell divides, it'll pass on that DNA. And what it's doing is it is expressing a couple of proteins. Okay? And these proteins basically tell these keratinocytes to keep dividing. Okay, so it keeps them in a stem-like state, and they keep dividing. These proteins E7 and E6. 6, 7? All right, they keep dividing. All right, they're normally not dividing here. They're normally differentiating up here and hardening. But now they're also dividing. What that's doing for the virus is it's increasing the number of cells that are infected, right? Then when we get up to these layers, the viruses express some more proteins. L1 and L2, and there's other ones in between here that I'm not talking about. Don't worry about it. And that's because up here, the virus wants to copy more of its DNA. Here we're copying cells. Here we want to copy the DNA to put it in new viruses that we're making. Okay? And we need to make the proteins to make the little capsid. Okay, so we basically need to turn these into like little viral factories. And then as these cells harden and slough off, the virus can spread either to the same host, right? It can spread around the tissue, or it can spread to a new host. Okay. All right, well, we have not talked about cancer yet, but you might be able to get some clues about how this leads to cancer. And something that happens that's associated with cancers is that the genome of HPV, the DNA, is then actually incorporated into the host's chromosome. So it becomes a part of us, actually. It's really cool. We now have viral DNA as a part of our genetic makeup. And this eventually can result in invasive cancers. Okay, so that's what this is. And, just so you know, 90% of cancer deaths are associated with this, invasive cancers, metastasis. Metastasis, okay? 90%. This is really bad. We don't want this. All right. Well, how does this happen? How do we go from just this normal HPV infection into this long-term HPV infection? And it's causing invasive cancer. Well, what happens is we've deregulated where E7 is expressed. So when E7 is expressed throughout the whole tissue, all these cells are then dividing all throughout. Okay. I've not put all the nuclei in there, but they're all there. All right. And they're all dividing. Okay, we just had it here, a very tight little cell division center right here. Now we got all the cells. So what's basically happening when we have cancer is our conductor, E7, commands everyone to play the same note, which is just divide, 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 divide. All of you do as I wish and divide, 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 divide. That's what's happening. Okay, E7 is now the controller. We no longer have this tight orchestration. I forgot that. Normally, things are very tightly organized here. We have E7, then E6, and you play these notes, you play these notes, and we're all good. Okay. Here, E7's in charge, and we're out of hand. All right. So, how does this actually happen? HPV actually do this? Well, HPV manipulates the cell cycle to spread. So normally our keratinocytes are here in G0. All right. G1 is the cells get bigger, S phase, copy the DNA, right? So we can divide. G2 is make sure we're ready to divide. And then M phase is let's go. Let's divide, baby. Okay. So normally our cells, our keratinocytes are here in G0, and we need to get them out of G0. Well, how could we get them in to this cell cycle? We got to get them out of this like kind of chilling phase and into this cycle. All right. Well, this cycle is controlled by some proteins. These proteins are called cyclins. Okay. And they control our progression through the cell cycle. So cyclin E puts us into S phase. We get a lot of cyclin E, it puts us into S phase. And cyclin A puts us into G2. Okay, we got some other ones here, but we don't even actually have to worry about these. Okay, we can get rid of these, and I'll show you why. But we can just focus on these two. What HPV needs to do is get a lot of cyclin E going and a lot of cyclin A going. Okay, and if it can do that, we can get pushed into M phase through some tricks. All right, so that's exactly what's happening. So we have cyclin E here, and we have cyclin A controlling this. If we get into this, cyclin A. They're backwards, it's my brain. Okay, so the way HPV increases levels of cyclin E and cyclin A is through E7, and it promotes those. Okay, now we've got one little tiny issue. And that one little tiny issue is right here. Let me do it like this. Right here, there is something called a checkpoint. And the purpose of the checkpoint is, has the DNA been copied correctly? If not, let's fix it. And if it's really messed up, let's just die. That's what this checkpoint's all about. Okay? So this is going to prevent, even if HPV has E7, this is going to prevent the cell from ever dividing, this checkpoint. Okay, it's going to lock us into position. And this checkpoint is controlled by another protein called P53. It's fun. It's a nice, fun little rhyme. P53. Okay, well, HPV doesn't really care if the DNA is copied correctly. Like, we're going to just keep going through this and making more and more and more. So if we got some mistakes, especially in the host DNA, not our problem as HPV. So HPV would love to get rid of this. And the way it does that is through E6. Okay, so that E6 protein, what it does is it inhibits this guy and it gets rid of it. Basically marks it for degradation. So we get rid of this checkpoint. We don't care about this. Later. See ya. Have fun. And so now what'll happen is our cell will just slide right into dividing, and then we'll push it right back into S phase because we got cyclin E because of E7, and we'll just fly through this bad boy. Okay, so HPV is essentially like taking control of everything. Okay, so our E7 protein is basically like it's hitting the gas on the cell cycle. This is like hit the gas. Hit the gas. Vroom, baby. Vroom. Like, let's go. And the way it does that is it inhibits another protein, which normally inhibits a transcription factor. So it's essentially like we're just removing this inhibition. And so now this transcription factor can just make cyclin E and A and all some other stuff, and the cells will divide. Okay, so that's what's going on there. And then E6 is like no brakes, bro. No brakes. Let's go. Let's go. Okay, it's like cutting the brake lines or like removing a wall, which I'll show you in a second. Okay, and this is just like, we basically remove the option for this. So it gets rid of P53, so we get rid of the options for cell death. Okay, so if we were to look at both of these together, it's like that. We just have cell proliferation. Pretty cool, right? Okay, and we'll end things with this little analogy. I got more I could talk about, but we'll end things with this little analogy where E7's driving a car. It's in the G0 parking lot. And whoop, lost the trunk. Don't want to lose the trunk. Whoop, okay? And it floors it up into S phase, and it's going to cram down here into G2. But normally it would hit this wall, this checkpoint, and that's where E6 comes in down here, and it's going to blow up this wall so that our E7 can cruise right on through, just fly right into M phase. And what happens is over time, if we run this cycle over and over and over and over and over again, we're going to result in cancer. We're going to be on a quick road, rapid road to cancer. Okay. So that's that little analogy. Got a couple more things that I could share with you, but I'll do them. So again, just like this is review, but long-term HPV infection looks something like this. Okay. So as our precancers develop and we get into actual cancer, more and more of the tissue, this is actually how we stage it, is expressing E7. So as more of the tissue expresses E7, so this is like the basal cells down here, and this is the kind of top surface of the cell. So as more of it expresses E7, we get into our invasive cancers. And again, 90% of these invasive cancers are what cause deaths related to cancer. Okay. And again, our E7 protein, when it gets in control and it's controlling the whole tissue, it's really bad for us. And it tells us all, everyone do my bidding, divide, divide, divide. We play the same note. It's very syncopated and dissident, and we want everybody to be doing the same thing. So why do we care about this? Well, about 40 million of us are infected with disease-causing HPV in America, and another 13 million become infected every year. Okay. And the vast majority of cervical, anal, vaginal, penile, and oropharynx cancers are all caused by HPV. You would think that like alcohol and tobacco would be the major cause, but they're not. It's actually HPV in the oropharynx. And a lot of those, like if you combine those three, like alcohol use, tobacco use, and you have HPV, like your chances of getting cancer dramatically increase because like we've removed this checkpoint, right? If we just have normal cell errors, right? We've removed this. This is going to really increase our risk for cancers and reduce our risk for catching any issues, right? Okay, and then the last thing, people often cite, in this study, they cited like safety as a number one concern for getting this vaccine or lack of necessity. Well, I think it's pretty necessary. 12% of the country has these, and 3% of the country is getting them every year. Okay, which means some amount of people are dying, right? So it's very necessary. And as far as safety goes, this is about as safe as a vaccine can get. So the way we do the vaccine is we take just the L1 gene, which makes the capsid or the exterior part of the virus, and we put that into a yeast or an insect cell, and that then makes little viral particles for us. They're just empty. They don't have the DNA in them. They just have the capsid, right? They don't have any DNA in them, and we can isolate those, and then we can inject these empty capsids into us. All right. And so that'll trigger our immune system to make antibodies against it. But we can't have any infection, and the capsids don't hang out that long. Our immune cells will gobble them up and get rid of them. So as far as safety of vaccine goes, it's pretty safe because there's no DNA or RNA going inside of us. Okay. And it's also very effective, right? Like it's a good vaccine. It's safe and it's effective. I showed you that at the very beginning, and we'll just end with that. So since we've introduced this vaccine in 2006, we've had an 80% reduction in cervical cancers. Like that's amazing. That's incredible. And we'll end with that. Thanks for listening. Glad you were here. It's just bonkers to me. An infectious cancer. Think about it. And we can protect ourselves against it so easily. So get vaccinated. They recommend it up to the age of 45 if you haven't had exposure. The younger you get it, obviously, the better, because then you're protected. And you need less doses when you're younger. Up until like 15, you only need 2 doses, and you're protected from HPV-related cancers. I mean, like, who wouldn't want that? All right, later.